Let's face it, Daniel Ricciardo isn't having the best time ever at Formula One. With a potential replacement and limited open seats for the 2023 season, he's got his options tied up. And if that wasn't enough, an F1 champion jumped in to give him a brutal reality check and even raised a burning question. Why does Alpine, or any team for that matter, want to pursue Ricciardo's signature? Bitter much? Let's find out why. First off, Jacques Villeneuve raises another question about Ricciardo's career. Now, the former F1 world champion has pretty much questioned his entire F1 career with one question. And maybe someone had to say it, because he even pointed out the 4 terrible years in the sport for the Australian. And that's pretty much true, because think about it. Ever since Ricciardo cut ties with Red Bull in 2018, he's had some pretty underwhelming 4 seasons in Formula One. And even now, he's reeling down in 14th on the driver's standings with no more than 19 points. Yes, there were definitely a couple of podium finishes back in Renault in 2020. And again, there was last year's thrilling Monza triumph where McLaren clinched a 1-2 finish. But is there any other dramatic victory that the teams are gonna remember? Not really, because there were only highlights in what seemed like a disappointing spell for the Perth driver. While that's the truth, Ricciardo isn't backing out of it either. In fact, he's set to face the consequences. And by that, we mean McLaren pretty much dumping the 33-year-old with 12 months remaining on his contract. In fact, they're bringing in the young compatriot Oscar Piastri as a replacement. Up next, it might not be over for Ricciardo just yet. Yep, there are still 6 races left in 2022 for the Australian to convince the other team members to pursue his signature. But is that enough? We'll find out. As for now, there are a few vacancies, but only at Williams, Alfa Romeo, Alpine, and Haas. At the same time, he's not really being announced as a candidate, to which Villeneuve's response was painfully blunt. The 1997 world champion told F1 TV why would he be? And from there, he basically went on to talk about how Ricciardo has had 2 terrible years at Renault. And to top it off, he survived another 2 years at McLaren that were even worse. So that's half of his career being called terrible. And while Ricciardo had limited options, there were speculations about him taking a step back to Alpine, which also seemed like the best move for him. On the other hand, Villeneuve doesn't think so. Instead, he said Alpine has absolutely no reason to take the F1 driver, especially because he's driven there before. So while the previous cars worked for him or not, there are modern cars now which don't seem to suit his driving style. With that said, the former F1 champion wasn't really trying to rip the Australian a new one. He was just honest. In fact, he talked about how Ricciardo's been pretty impressive at Red Bull with amazing overtaking maneuvers and was always ahead of Max Verstappen. But that was only until Max started to get a handle on him, and the Australian switched, and after the switch, he never seemed to recover from it. Coming up, Ricciardo might be taking from F1 and all the drama. Now, consider a potential slip of the tongue or a well-played move, but while chatting with Mexico's Sergio Perez after the Dutch Grand Prix, the news took over about the Perth driver's intention to take a break from F1 for a year and make a comeback in 2024. We know, not the best move for him right now, and Villeneuve seems to agree to say it could make him lazy. Adding to that, he said if you're an Alonso or a Schumacher or some other world champion who has bagged victory many times, and if the teams know you're always going to be at your best no matter what season, then sure, take a year off. But if you've got a history of 4 terrible years, it's not the best move. So in Formula One, you gotta take what you can get. And if you've got an offer to drive in Formula One, and even if it's not the best, you still need to take every damn cockpit. In public, many F1 drivers gotta be honest and say they're not going to be driving for one of the back teams. But if that's your only shot at staying in the sport, you take it. Following up, here are Ricciardo's plans for F1. Okay, so he's got a few offers, but he's taking his time to decide. Although, there's definitely been some news about him linked with Haas. Having said that, the team principal, Günther Steiner, played down the rumors in what looks like another blow for the Australian. Adding to that, he said that he's talking to a bunch of potential drivers and not just Ricciardo, because that's his job. At the same time, there's nothing concrete yet, but they also want to take the smallest risks for the development of the team. And for them, the Perth driver seems like a big risk who might not be worth it in the long run. Having said that, he added that there aren't any of those experienced and technical drivers available on the market, except for Daniel. But again, his form isn't so great at the moment, so they're not too sure. But he also mentioned the possibility of the F1 driver sitting out a year. What's more, Mercedes decided to jump in with an offer. Yep, other than all the existing offers, Mercedes recently jumped in with an offer for a reserve driver in 2023. And yes, that might not be the most exciting offer ever, but here's the main part of the story. Lewis Hamilton's contract is up at the end of the 2023 season, and there are already talks about his retirement. Adding to that, after the devastating incident in Abu Dhabi last year, things haven't been looking too good for the 7-time world champion recently. So, if he decides to leave by the end of the 2023 season, Mercedes implied that Daniel could take his seat and race for the team in 2024. Now, that's an offer to consider, but do you think Hamilton is going to back out so easily once he hears about this? Of course not. He jumped in, saying that he's got absolutely no plans on leaving Formula One in the near future to ditching the plans of a potential investment. At the same time, Ricciardo hasn't really confirmed or denied the rumors either, saying that he's just exploring all the possible options right now. Not to mention, Hamilton is ready to welcome Daniel to the team. In fact, he said the Australian driver should still be racing, and he earned the right to be a part of the Mercedes team. Adding to that, he said, if I was his manager, he would be racing. Now, it's fair to say that both of them aren't really at their best. We've seen the best of the 7-time world champion and the Aussie star, and we all know what they're really capable of. But whether it's just a temporary setback or just the start of a long chain of terrible races, that's how the F1 grid is. There's always going to be other F1 drivers to replace you, and every team's out there looking for the best, but also evaluating their risk. So whether Hamilton retires or Daniel decides to take up the offer, it could change a lot for the Mercedes team. Finally, Daniel Ricciardo is definitely one of those F1 drivers you never forget. Other than being a cult hero in the Netflix F1 documentary Drive to Survive, the Australian had some of his best days too. Now, maybe if you look back, switching from Red Bull wasn't the best move because it really started off a terrible season after season streak for him, and that led him to become a free agent for 2023 after agreeing to an early release from his deal with McLaren. And while he says it was a mutual decision, did he really have a choice after 2 underwhelming seasons? Right after he switched to McLaren at the start of 2021, after 2 seasons with Renault, who now goes by Alpine, Daniel's fortunes nosedived as his teammate Lando Norris continued to outperform him. Now, we could add the stunning triumph for McLaren at the 2021 Italian Grand Prix to his tally of race wins, but sadly, from then on, the Perth driver has generally fallen short of expectations. And that's right when McLaren was trying to re-establish themselves as an F1 championship contender alongside other great teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. Clearly, if Daniel had been racing well, like we'd expect him to at least, he might have been an asset for the team as it develops. Having said that, we hope Daniel Ricciardo reveals his plans for the future soon, because fans are clinging to every news they can find while evaluating his options. Until then, it looks like we gotta wait and watch. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on the Formula One World Champion's brutal reality check for Daniel Ricciardo? Do you think it was justified or just an awful attack on the F1 driver? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.